Good evening, everybody.
Kavod Haraf, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, sorry to make you wait. I apologize. Okay. Facebook. Okay. So we're moving along here to the end of the chapter. Let's get moving. So yeah, it says in the tour like this. Ve'echad anashim ve'echad nashim chayavim bahem, right? So as we read yesterday, what it means is that women and men are equally obligated, when it comes to the mitzvot of the Haggadah, of the Passover, the Seder, right? So it's equal. Men and women are equal, in every way, pretty much, right? That's the story. So they have to do all the mitzvot, just like the men. So it says here in the Bet Yosef, he brings a source for this. Sham, it's over there in the Gemara, Kuf Chet Amud Aleph. Nashim chayavot b'dalet kosod, right? First of all, it says women are obligated to do 4 cups of wine, right? Because you may think, by the way, they're not obligated. Why? Because the Talmud says, right, that women shouldn't drink too much wine. You know what I mean? But when it comes to this night, right, they have to do the 4 cups. It's interesting, by the way, that why is it that even though the Talmud says, right, women shouldn't drink too much, but here, it's the rabbis obligated her. So the answer must be because it's something holy that they don't get harmed by it. Doesn't affect them. Doesn't affect them in the wrong way because of the holiness of it. You know what they say, right? That the night of Passover, it's a guarded night, right? It's Leil Shimurim. So it's guarded from the harmful agents that night, so therefore there's a special protection that night. And that's the reason why we're not obligated, when we go to sleep, right, that night, the first night of Passover, we're not obligated to do all the the rituals that we do at night, before we go to sleep, like saying, the bedtime Shema and all that stuff, right? We're not obligated to do all those things because it's guarded, so we don't need to say the Kriyat Shema to be guarded. It's already guarded as is. That's the story. So, okay, good. So, and he says, besides that, right, so why are they obligated to do the 4 cups? Because they also, right, benefited from that miracle, right, which is the, the Exodus, right? They also got benefit from that, obviously. So therefore, he says, that makes them liable for every mitzvah that night, right? Just like the men, as we said. Just like it says in the tour. Okay, so beautiful. That's great, right? That's the Bet Yosef. Let's see Shulchan Aruch here. So it says Shulchan Aruch, Gam hanashim chayavot be'arba kosot, right? As we said, The women are also obligated in the 4 cups of wine, v'chol mitzvot hanoagot be'oto layla, right? And also all the mitzvot, right? As we said. So they have to do everything. The whole thing, right? The Haggadah, right? The maror, the karpas, the matzah, right? The kricha, the sandwich, the afikoman, everything, right? The whole thing from A to Z. Okay, good. So let's go on. We have one more in this chapter, so let's get to it. So says the Torah like this: "Hatinokot tov liten lechol echad koso lefanav umitzvah lechalek lehem kaliot begozim." Right? We already read this, but I'll just review it. That it says right that the children, it's good to give them, each one should have like a cup of wine, to train him, for the mitzvot. So, whatever, just give him a cup. It doesn't really have to mean, it doesn't mean that he has to, right, to drink as much as the adults, but at least, he should be trained. So, like, he should have it on hand, and whatever, and pretend like he's doing something. He's actually doing something. He's not really pretending, right? So, right, but he's not, doing as much as the adults may, perhaps, right? But still, right, he's doing something there. Right, so this way he'll remember, oh yeah, when I was a kid, my parents, told me to, right, to drink 4 cups of wine and all that stuff, right? Yeah, now I remember. Yeah, I know. So he'll have that etched in his memory, all those things, right? All things that we did on the Agada. Um, okay, so that's one thing. And then he says also another thing, which is that, as we mentioned yesterday, try to give them some treats, right? So, nowadays, what do we give them? Candies, right? Stuff like that, right? Just make sure they're kosher for Passover. These candies, right? There's no flour in them or whatever, right? So, give them some candies, some chocolate, whatever, right? Some nuts, I don't know, whatever they like, right? All the good stuff, right? Some chips, whatever, right? All kinds of goodies. What's the purpose of that, right? That they should know it's a special night. They're getting like treats. So this way they'll ask questions, about it. Like, what's so special tonight? Why are you spoiling me so much? What happened? Right? That's the idea. So כדי שיראו שינוי um, וישאלו, right? As we said. Okay, good. So that's the end of the tour. We're done with this tour, so let's go to Bet Yosef. So it says Bet Yosef, Ken Katvu Sham Arosh, right, Mordechai. So the source is the Morosh and the Mordechai, right, regarding this issue. Katav Arosh b'tshuva, he writes in the tshuva the Rosh, Dehainu b'tinokot shegiu lechinuch. So he says, what are we talking about here? We're talking about children who are already at the age of training, right? So we talked about this, by the way, the age of training, when we talked about the issue of, tzitzit and tefillin and prayers and all kinds of things, right? God knows what. So, right, we said that the age of training starts around 6 or 7, right? That's when it starts. So if they're already at that age, there's a mitzvah already to involve them, in all the stuff and all the right, the whole procession, the whole ceremony, right, that night. The younger ones, which are like, they're like 2 years old, they're not really get much from that, right? So they're not really a part of that. That's what he's trying to say, right? They're just barely hanging around, whatever, right? So that's good enough. The fact that they're hanging around is also good enough. You're not going to get much intellectually, right, out of that, obviously, but the ones who are already 6 or 7, they already, are very cognizant of what's going on, and it's also a mitzvah to train them as well, So therefore, right, you got to already bring them into the fold. Okay, good. So right, besides that, he says, okay, good. That's it. We're done. Bit Yosef. Okay, there actually there's one more, but one at a time, right? First, we'll do this one, one at a time. No rush. Okay, so um, Yeah. So it says in the Shulchan Aruch, "Tinokot shegiu lechinuch." So it says, right, that if the children are already at the age of training, mitzvah liten lechol echad koso lefanav. So each one gets like a cup of wine right there. We put it in front of him, to remind him, right, what has to be done, to teach him, to train him. So it says the Rama, ואין ניקח כוס שפיו צר כאין כלוג גלז, מפני שלא יוכל לשתות רביעית כאחד. So the Rama gives you some unrelated advice over here, which is not really related to this issue of the children, right? So he says, right, that don't use a cup or a glass, right, which has a very narrow top. Why is that? Because since it's so narrow on the top, you can't really drink like, a revi'it, 3 ounces in one shot. So we want you to be able to, pull it out really fast, to suck it out, to really take a nice big sip. So that's why, he tells you that, right? The Rama here. בכוס של ברכת המזון, בלאו הכי אין לוקחים אותו. So he says, right, that when it comes to the cup of Birkat Hamazon, he says we shouldn't use that, he says. Interesting. I'm not exactly sure why he says that, but first of all, right, just to give you an idea of what's going on. So he's telling you, right, that don't use the cup of Birkat Hamazon. So I guess we should look at the Mishnah Berurah, yeah, because I'm not really sure why he says this. Let's see. צריך ליתן עיניו בו כמבואר שם, וכן לעניין קידוש כגבנה. אוקיי. Interesting, right? So says Mishnah Berurah, the reason why you shouldn't use the Kiddush cup, right, or the cup for Birkat Hamazon, is because you have to put your eyes on it, he says. So what does that mean? You got to look at it. So let's see. Okay, that gives you a little bit of a hint of what he's talking about here. So let's go back to the Ramah one more time and see what he says. So we can figure out this puzzle here, right? It's a little bit of a puzzle, jigsaw puzzle, whatever, right? Some kind of mystery here going on. Right? So it says, because של ברכת המזון, בלאו הכי אין לוקחין אותו. Right. Oh, okay. אין סימן קוף בגימל, סעיף ד' וכן הכוס של קידוש ואין ליל סימן, right. So he gives you the source, right, where to look for this, to see what the situation is, right? So let me just take a quick look there, if you don't mind, so we can see what's going on with this, because I don't really get it. Kuf Pe Gimel Dalid. I'm going to take a quick look over there. Okay. Okay. Now, okay. I if I wouldn't have looked at this, I never would have understood what he's saying. So what he's saying is like this, right? The language is not really so clear there. That's the problem. I'm not showing you the screen, by the way, but you can trust me. I can, I can tell you what it says here, right? I hope you trust me. So, right, it says here like this, right? In the Ramah, in the laws of Birkat Hamazon, he says there, right, that you shouldn't use for Birkat Hamazon for the cup of Birkat Hamazon. So let me just explain to you what that means, right? That there's a mitzvah when you do Birkat Hamazon and you have three people, right, dining together on the same table. There's a mitzvah to drink a cup of wine after the Birkat Hamazon. Right, that's one thing, right? So the question is, what does that have to do with us? So he says there in the Ramah, right, that when you use a cup for Birkat Hamazon, right, you shouldn't use a cup which has a narrow top, right, a narrow rim on the top. That's what he's saying over here. You understand? So he says there's two things now going over here, right? One thing is that you shouldn't use it because you can't drink fast from it, right? And that bothers us here regarding the laws of Pesach. You can't drink it in one shot because the rim is too narrow. That's one thing. But there's also another problem, he says, right, which gets added on top, which is that since, as we said, right, we mentioned already yesterday or the day before, one of the cups, right, that we drink for Pesach is after Birkat Hamazon. So it's for Birkat Hamazon, right? The concept is like that. So if that's the case, right, we shouldn't use it, if it's narrow because of that reason as well, because you're not supposed to use it for Birkat Hamazon either. Right? So explains the Mishnah Brura, the reason why you're not supposed to use it for Birkat Hamazon is because you can't see it well. Why? Because it's so narrow, right? You can't look inside. This is the problem. So you're supposed to be looking at the wine. That's the thing, right? But you can't really look at it if the mouth is very narrow. So that's another reason why you shouldn't use it for Passover. So you got two reasons. That's what the Ramah is saying. Okay, so that's good. That's one thing. The same thing also applies for Kiddush, right? So what does that mean? You're not supposed to use also, right, like a narrow cup like that for Kiddush as well, for the same reason, because you can't see it. You can't drink it, right? Also, quickly, as we said. So all these things, right, come up to, that's what we're talking about here. So there's several reasons why you shouldn't use something like that. Baruch Hashem, most of us don't use things like that. Whatever, so it's okay.
Kabbalah Taraf, what would be considered narrow, like the diameter, more or less?
You can't really give a measure for that. But the point is, right, that if it's so narrow that you can't drink fast, you understand? You can't drink it in one shot. It's too narrow for that. So basically, right, the rim is like a straw. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's
Now
like that. You can't drink it so fast. You have to do it slow.
Okay, thank you.
I think, by the way, even a straw, you could do that probably. You could drink 3 ounces with a straw in one shot. I could do it. I have no problem with that. Right? So my suction is still pretty good. So, so it must be really narrow, right? Like, we're talking about like half a straw. I don't know, whatever you want to call it, or a quarter, right? Whatever, God knows. It's not really something which you're gonna come into contact with, right? Not very common. I guess the reason why they had cups like that with a narrow rim is because it was like for liquor, and liquor is very strong, so you want to drink it slowly. That's the whole thing, right? Like brandy, let's say, right? So when it's narrow, it goes down slowly, and so it's nice. You don't have to drink it too fast because it's very strong, it's very potent. I guess that's the whole thing, right? Whatever. So that's what it means to say. Okay, very good. So right, I wouldn't worry about this too much. Don't lose any sleep over it. I don't think you're gonna come across something like that. So that's the story there. Okay, so we got one more. So right, it says we gotta just see the Bet Yosef. He brings the source there, and then we'll get right into the Shulchan Aruch. So it says Bet Yosef, right? What's the source for this regarding what the Torah said, right? That you should hand out treats to the children. So it's a Braita, right, over there in Kuf Chet Amud Bet in the same Gemara in Psachim, right? So all these rules that we're learning come from that Gemara, right? Pretty much, right? As we see, right? 99.9% of the rules come from there. So yeah, so let's see the Shulchan Aruch. So it says, right, Shulchan Aruch, mitzvah lechalek tinokot kaliot v'gozim. As we said, right, it's a mitzvah to give treats to the children. So make sure you got all your treats, right, for the kids, v'kedei she'ir'u shinui v'yishalu. Right, so what's the point? That they should see, right, there's a different, we're treating them differently tonight. And they should ask questions, like get curious. What's going on? Right? What's so special about tonight, right? Right? Why is this night different than the other nights? Right? Okay, that's good, right? That's the story. Okay, very good. So we're done with this chapter. So let's see, right, what's coming up. And we'll see where we can go. This is all very important stuff. So we should go on, right? Go on and learn this stuff because it's talking about the seder, how to do the seder, So we need to know. So it says the Tur here, right? Umozgin lo kos rishon. So what we do is, right, that first we start. How do we start the Haggadah? By making kiddush, right? That's the first order of business. So by the way, I'm going to slip something in here, that you may have not known, which is that according to Sephardi custom, right? We have a custom according to the Kabbalah. Also, by the way, the Hasidim do this, and also some Ashkenazim, they do. Some, especially in Eretz Israel. Not here in America, not so much, but the Hasidim, they do it because they like Kabbalah, Hasidim like Kabbalah, so, right, according to Kabbalah, you're supposed to say the big Hallel that night, right? I'm talking about before the Haggadah. You know what I mean? So what we do, right, then the men is when we go to shul, we say it over there. When we finish our vit, right, the next order of business is to say the Hallel with the blessing and everything. Can you imagine? So we do the big Hallel with the blessing. Now here's the thing, right? That Maran told me, Rabbi, that the women should also do this, right? According to the Kabbalah, even though they're not going to shul. So therefore, what they should do is say it at home. Unless you're one of those shul goers, right? There are some ladies who are shul goers, but most of the ladies who are married, they don't go to shul. What married woman are going to see in shul on the night of Passover? Tough, right? Not such a good chance, against like that, right? So fat chance, right? Whatever. So the women are not coming to shul that night, right? So therefore, right, what they do is they're going to say the Hallel at home, the big Hallel with the blessing and everything. Deluxe, the Hallel, right? That's what they. So Maran told me, Rabbi Shalom, that the women should also say that. So what does that mean? When the men, come home from shul, they already said it. So the women should also say it, And this way, when the men come home, they're already done. So we can get started with the seder, and not have to wait for them, for them to say the Hallel. So they should do it, like relatively early. So everything has to be done early, that night. You know what I mean? You don't want to be like behind the eight ball, as we already mentioned that. We talked about that, right? So everything should be done on time. This way you can finish on time promptly, right? Not have to finish, 3:00 in the morning, right? A little bit too late. So, right, it's not the proper way to do it. So as we said, right, you should finish before midnight. Everything. right? So that means you gotta go at a decent pace, otherwise you got a problem.
So Kabot Harav, that evening there's 2.5 Hallel, no? The deluxe one at after.
Exactly, that's what it is, right? Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was gonna say that. Basically, you have three Hallels, two big and one small, right? Two and a half, whatever you want to call it, right? That's what it is. But as we said, the one we do, I just mentioned now, is only a custom, it's not really obligation, according to halakha, So, the truth is that the obligation is really to read the Haggadah as is, which is one and a half. And then there's a custom to do also according to Kabbalah, before. That's what we're saying, right? So, the big rabbis, the big shots, they all, praise this custom, right? They say, according to Kabbalah, it's a very big thing. So therefore, right, everybody should try to do it. But the Ashkenazim, the Lithuanian Ashkenazim, what I mean? Especially the ones not in Israel, right? The ones outside, they don't really do it. They don't have a custom to do that. They don't do according to Kabbalah, the prayers so much. You know what I mean? Not as much as we do. So therefore, right, they don't do it. But the ones who are, besides them, pretty much everybody does it. The Hasidim, the Sfaradim, right? Whatever. So that's about 2/3 of the Jewish people. Lithuanians about 1/3, let's say, right? For argument's sake, right? 1/3, whatever you want to call it. In Israel, by the way, the Sephardim are even more. Like there's, it's like 50% Sephardim in Israel, if not more. But in America here, the Ashkenazim are a much bigger group than the Sephardim. No question about that. Yeah. So, but recently, the demographics have changed a little bit because the Bukharians came in and the Syrians, and they're a large group. These two groups, you know what I mean? The Bukharians and the Syrians. So we're talking about 200,000 people there, So demographics have changed a little bit, especially in the New York area. So things are a little bit different now, but whatever. It's still, still the Ashkenazim are the majority. But when it comes to Israel, it's a Sephardi country, It's a very Sephardi culture over there. Different culture.
Which ones are more dangerous?
The Arabs, Hamas. They're the ones. They're the ones who are dangerous. The Jews are never dangerous. They're always safe.
No, I was too late with the question. I wanted to jump in when you mentioned the Syrians and the Bukharians.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem, they're all peace-loving people.
Mm.
These people, they're not violent. Baruch Hashem, Jewish people are not violent people. Right? It says in the Talmud, by the way, that Stam Goy is violent. In other words, usually a Goy is violent. In other words, if you egg him on, he'll start waving his arms.
Well, I'm not talking about
a Jew is not like
somehow.
that. A Jew can tolerate a lot of abuse before he's going to put his hands up. You know what I mean? But
I was talking more about
the Goy, once you annoy him a little bit, he'll already start waving his fists at you.
I was
That's the way it is. You know that. I don't have to tell you. You went to Forest Hills High School. You know very well.
Well, I have some very, 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 very gentile friends in
yeah. They're gentle until a point, until you annoy them a little bit. Once you start annoying them, they'll put their fists up and start swinging their fists. That's what they do. So, not all of them.
I know some crazy,
but the majority of them are like that.
Too. Yeah.
The majority of them are they can be violent. So you gotta watch out. So anyway, right, that's the story there. So so as we said, right, that so the first thing we do, as we said, right, we say the Hallel. Okay, we got that. Let's go beyond that, right, a little bit. So then, right, according to halakha, the first order of business is kiddush, right? When you start the Haggadah. So when you're doing the kiddush, the first thing you do, right, is to mix the cup, right? What does that mean, mix the cup? That means you're gonna, right, put some wine in there and then add a little bit water. Right? That's the idea, As we said, if your wine is not so strong, you don't really need water, according to halacha, But in the old days, right, they used to add. And now we do it according to Kabbalah. We add a few drops of water in there, whatever, right? Well, it's whatever. Whatever you want to do, right? Whatever your custom is to do, God bless you. Right? It's all good, right? Whichever way you want to do it. The rabbi used to say, my rabbi used to say that the truth is, he said, that today, most of the wines which are on the market, water is already added to them, a little bit. Like about 10% or something, whatever, I'm talking about, the regular wines, but the high grade wines, like Cabernet and Merlot, the dry ones, you can't add water to those, because it ruins them. I'm talking about to add it, before during the production. I'm not talking about adding it in the house, right? The house you can do what you want, but if you add it, during the production, and you bottle it like that, it'll ruin the wine. So this way, right? This is the reason why to the dry wines, the high grade wines, they don't add water to it. But when you're talking about, your regular, garden variety wines, which are not so high grade, right? As we talked about, Manischewitz and Kedem, things like this, the water is already added there. So it's already ready made, ready to go. So, right, either way, that's the way it goes, right? So that's the first order of business. And you make the kiddush, right? Everybody, has a glass of wine in front of them. Make the kiddush, right? And you bless, right? Bor Pri Gefen, kiddush hayom, and then you make the language of the kiddush, and then we say Shechianu, right? Why Shechianu? Because it's a holiday, right? The first day of the holiday, so we make Shechianu, right? But he says we don't bless. Right? We don't do this blessing. Why is that? Because you're going to say it in the Haggadah. So therefore, right, there's no reason to do it twice. Right? So we don't do it over here. We wait until we say it in the Haggadah. And right? So it says if it falls on Shabbat, the first night of Passover, you should say Vaychulu, right? Also, because Vaychulu, is something we say on Shabbat. If it falls on, right, Saturday night, the first night, Omer Yakanahaz, right? You have to do Havdalah, right? Candle, right, and stuff, all that stuff, right? You gotta have your, setup ready for the Havdalah. We don't do the Besamim, by the way, right? We don't do the spices. We don't bless on the spices, but we do the candle, right? If you ever seen this before, how we do it on Yom Tov, right? When we have a Yom Tov that falls after Shabbat. If you ever seen that before, we do have a candle there. Yes. So it says, right? Yan Kiddush Havdalah, Zman Nusach Havdalah. So what does that mean? What's the order of business, right? If it falls on the Motzi Shabbat after Shabbat, first wine you bless on the wine, and then you make the Kiddush, and then you bless on the candle, and then you make the Havdalah, right? The Havdalah blessing. Zman Nusach Havdalah, right? So it says, and Zman, and then you make a Shechianu, right? Shechianu. That's the last thing you make. So he says, how do you say, right, the Havdalah? So he brings here, right, this whole blessing here, right? So he says like that, right? This, right? Okay, maybe we should first do a little bit Yosef, and we'll get back to this maybe next time, right? Maybe tomorrow. Okay. So let's see, Bet Yosef. We already read a lot of Torah. Let's see if we can catch up here. Yes. So, yeah. So it says, right, the Bet Yosef. Where's the source for this? That we start with Kiddush. Mishnah Bepek Arve Psachim, right? It's over there in Kuf Yud Daled, right? Amud Aleph and the Gemara there, in the Mishnah. And one which he says is first you make Bor Pri Gefen, Kiddush Hayom, and then Kiddush, right? Sham Machloket Bet Shammai Bet Hillel. So it's a dispute between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel and the Talmud, right? Regarding this issue, Bet Hillel, and we pass like Bet Hillel. So they say, right, you bless on the wine. You should bless on the wine. Umash katav shechianu besov. Now what you said, right? You make shechianu in the end, right? Hachi mashma begemara. That's the way it implies in Talmud. Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph Gabe Yaknehaz, right? Regarding the issue of Yaknehaz, which is the Havdalah order, right? That we do that night if it falls on Motzi Shabbat. Umash katav be'eno mevarech she'asa nisim lefi she'atid la'amro be'Haggadah. And now what you said, right? We shouldn't say she'asa nisim because this is something which we say in Haggadah, so there's no reason to repeat it twice, right? Why repeat it? What's the point? And if it falls on after Shabbat, as we said, right, we have to do the Havdalah and the candle, right, or the whole thing there. But no spices, right? Don't bring out the spices. Forget about that. Hachi maskana the Gemara. Right? He says that's the conclusion of the Gemara there. Perek Arei Psachim, same place there. Umash katav nusach Havdalah, right? And now what you said, right, regarding the text of the Havdalah, right? So let's, by the way, go back there and see the text. Right, you're gonna find this in your local, right, in your local siddur that you have in your house, right, your private siddur, the text of the Havdalah. But this is what he brings over here in the tour, right, the text. It has some variations, in different siddurim, right, the language is going to be a little bit variation there. But this is the basic text, right? It says like this: Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, hamabdil ben kodesh lechol uben or lechoshech. ובין ישראל לעמים, ובין יום השביעי לששת ימי המעשה, בין קדושת שבת לקדושת יום טוב הבדלת, ואת יום השביעי מששת ימי המעשה קידשת. הבדלת, right, הבדלת וקידשת את עמך ישראל בקדושתך, ברוך אתה השם, המבדיל בין קודש לקודש. Right? So this is the text of the Havdalah. Right? So I'm not going to translate every word, but right, basically, I'll tell you the main idea, right? The main idea is like this. What it's saying here is that you divide it up between, right, Shabbat and differentiate it between Shabbat and Yom Tov, right? So in other words, we're blessing on that concept that there's a differentiation between Shabbat and Yom Tov. We're going from one to the other, right? We're transferring over. And that's why, we end the blessing that he separates between holy and holy, right? Not like we do on other times. On Motzi Shabbat, we say Hamadil ben Kodesh Lechol, right? He differentiates between holy and mundane. But here they're both holy, so we say holy and holy. That's the difference, right? And then, right, what's the bottom line here? Once he says the Havdalah, V'shoteh be'eseba, right? Then he has to drink. But right, don't forget one thing, right? When you drink, you have to recline. After all, this is Passover, right? This is not regular holiday. This is not regular Shabbat. So therefore, when you drink the first cup, make sure you're reclining, and also for all the 4 cups, right? On your left side and on your right. Right? Don't make a mistake. Okay. Right? So it says, Lo hesev tzarich lishtot pa'am achet be'seba. Says if he didn't recline, guess what? He has to drink again another cup, right? With this time reclining, because he didn't fulfill his obligation. So let's see the Bet Yosef regarding that. So make sure you do things the right way, right? It says Mara.
Kavod Harav, this if he didn't recline, he reclines without the bracha, right? At this point.
Right, he's gonna drink again, of course, without a blessing.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. As we said, right, the Ashkenazim, they bless on every cup, but they don't bless on the extra cups, right? They don't bless on. Okay, that's like extra, because you already drank, you already had one. So you just didn't do it properly. That's the problem. But you did drink after all, right? You drank. Okay. So all right, good. So it says, right, that and so he says, right, where did he get this text from? For the blessing, but Perek has these car, right? Same place in the Talmud there. He gives you the text for the blessing. Kuf Dal Amud Aleph, right? Ipligu Amorai, right? There's a dispute over there amongst the rabbis, right? What is the proper text there? Im tzarich shiomar me'enat chatima. samuch lechatima. So there's a machloket there, regarding how it should be structured. This Havdalah over there. או מן פתיחת מאמרים בדיקה בעיניי הוא אם יום טוב שיכול להיות אחר שבת תחתמינן בין קודש לקודש מאן דאמר מעין פתיחה סמוך לחתימה לא בעיה לממר באי קדושת שבת בין קדושת שבת לקדושת יום טוב והבדלת ומאן דאמר מעין החתימה באי לממר ופסקו. So what is he saying over here, right? He's telling you that there's a dispute about how the blessing is structured, because there are different opinions there regarding the concepts that are involved here. I'm not going to get into all the little details about that right now, but the point is, right, that there's a machloket. But right, the bottom line is the halacha says that this is the text that we use, the one we just mentioned, right, in the tour. Look in your sidur, right, and you'll find it there. Your machzor, right, whatever, right. You'll see there what the exact text is, according to your custom, right? There's some variations on that here and there, one or two words here and there, right? No big deal. It's all the same. Okay, so right, Pasku Arif Arosh Kiman Diamar Mein Chatima, right? So the Rif and the Rosh Paskind, right? V'katvu Tosfot Baya Lememar Ben Kedushat Shabbat V'Kedushat Yom Tov. So right, they bring the exact text that we just mentioned, right? They pass like what we just said. Shal Rabbeinu Ephraim et Rabbeinu Tam. So it says, right, that Rabbeinu Ephraim asked Rabbeinu Tam a question, right? These, by the way, were from the Tosfot. These rabbis, they're friends, they're good friends with each other. So one asks the other, למה נהגו העולם להוסיף ולומר את יום השבת שביעי בששת ימי המעשה קידשת והבדלת וקידשת את ימיך ישראל בקדושתך דאין זה לא מעין פתיחה ולא מעין חתימה. So he asked him a question, right? Why do we have the structure of the blessing, for this Havdalah that we say, which is different than the structure that we have usually, for Motzi Shabbat, right? Why is it different? That's what he's asking, right? משום חיבת היום העריכו כדי לומר פעם אחת מעין שבע הבדלת בין קודש לכל אחד. So he says the reason why it's different, the structure, is because it's just because it's a special kind of occasion. What does that mean? What's a special occasion? That you're going from Shabbat to Yom Tov. It's something like very holy. Right? It's very special. It's very conducive, to all kinds of holy, holy, results, whatever, right? So therefore, they made a special, blessing for that, which is different than the normal text, something like that. Okay. וידלת קדש לימיך ישראל וקדושת לך לשתי דירות בין כהנים לוויים ישראלים והרי ישיבה והרי מעין החתימה בין קודש לקודש עד כאן השלום. כתבו כל זה על ראש, right? So it says Rosh wrote all this stuff, right, that we just mentioned. He wrote everything, he summed up everything. I'm sorry, one second. Yeah, I missed something here. Yeah. והמורדכי בתוך זה יתבאר לך שאין נחוש למה שכתוב בספר אורחות חיים. So it says, from this discussion you see, we shouldn't be concerned about what it says in Orchot Chaim, right? This book that that was written. לערער על נוסח זה, that he doesn't like this text, that we have in the blessing, for this blessing. He doesn't think it's the right one. והר"ן בפרק הנזכר דקדק דלא בא לממר בהבדלה זו בין יום השביעי לששת ימי המעשה ונתן טעם למה נהגו לאומרו, right? So the Ran brings a reason why we don't do the regular text, right? He brings a whole reason there, reasoning behind that. כתוב באורחות חיים, so it says in אורחות חיים, פעם, we're almost done with this, right? פעם אחד שכח רבי להבדיל במוצאי שבת יום טוב של פסח עד שאכל ירקות. So he says what happened was, interesting, right? I can imagine this happening today as well. What he says here, right? Which is, he says, one time my rabbi forgot to make this Havdalah, right? Meaning what? That it was, Shabbat going into Yom Tov, and he forgot to say this Havdalah. Oh, not only he forgot to say it, but then he went on to eat, right, some vegetables. He went to eat the karpas, right, whatever, right? So the question is, right, what happens when you don't say the Havdalah and you start eating the vegetables? What do we do with you, right? Do we execute you? We get executed, right? What's your prognosis over here, right? So it says, והתחיל ההגדה, כי קודם שגמר ההגדה, נזכר ולא רצה לחזור להבדיל עד שהשלים ההגדה עד גאל ישראל, right? So it says, so what my rabbi did was, he says that he didn't really, go back and do the Havdalah until he finished, the whole thing before the meal, that little Hallel, right, that we do, as we said. So he didn't want to interrupt and do the Havdalah until he finished the whole thing. Meaning what? Up to the up to where the meal starts, right? The matzah, and there he said the Havdalah. Okay, go figure, right? Okay. I guess because he didn't want to interrupt right in the middle of the Haggadah, and to do Havdalah. I guess he felt that it wasn't really, wasn't proper to interrupt there, to interpose in the middle there, and like get sidetracked to something else. Now what she said, right, that the conclusion of this blessing is kodesh to kodesh. What does that mean? Holy to holy, right? Not holy to mundane, like we say usually in Havdalah. Gam zeh sham ve'achi tanan. It's also over there in the Talmud there, right? And we learn the Mishnah that perk kama de chulin. It's also in the first perk of chulin. That's what it says. Kaf vav amud bet. Okay, very good. So let's do the Shulchan Aruch and we're done. I kept you a little bit longer because we started late, so I didn't want to shortchange you in any way. I'm sorry. I apologize. No shortchanging over here. Okay. Yeah, so we have to pull it up, right? We're going to a new chapter here. So let's just see. Right, so this is very tough Ein Bet. Okay, just want to make sure I got the right chapter. So we're going to tough Ein Gimel. Okay. Yeah. So it says in Shulchan Aruch, Mozgin lo kos rishon mekadesh elav, right? As we said, right? The first thing we do is to pour out the cup, pour the cup, right? To the first cup of wine. As we said, right? Whoever adds water. God bless you. Right? If you want to do that. And mekadesh elav, we make kiddush. Right? And we do also shechianu in the end of the kiddush. B'Shabbat. So as we said, right, if it falls on Shabbat, the first night of Passover, Omer Vayichulu is going to say Vayichulu as well. It's part of the kiddush. If it's falling after Shabbat, Motzi Shabbat, Omer Yaknahaz, he's going to do Havdalah, right? As we said, right? The candle, the Havdalah, the whole thing, right? So he says, right, as we said just now in the Beit Yosef, that if he forgot to say the Havdalah, and then he just remembered, right, when he was in the middle of the Haggadah. So what should he do? Yashlim Haggadah ad Gad Yisrael. He should finish, right, as we said, until the meal, which is Gad Yisrael, right? That's the last blessing you make there. And then you're gonna make the Havdalah there. You're gonna make it up over there, as we just mentioned. So says Ramah here ואין ליטול ידיו כלל קודם קידוש. Look what he says, right? Says the Rama, don't wash your hands before the kiddush. There's no reason for that. You know what I mean? In other words, don't now start getting to extra things. It's enough as it is. For us, right? All the things that we do. We wash our hands twice that night. And now you want to wash your hands again, a third time, right? Too much already, right? So that's what he's telling you, right? There's no reason to wash your hands before the kiddush. Okay, unless your hands are dirty, obviously. That's something else. I'm not talking about that. Good. That's what he says. And then afterwards he says, any adav nikiot, as we said, as I just told you, right? If your hands are not clean, he told me, right, you should wash your hands a little bit, right? But don't bless on that, right? There's no blessing to wash your hands when they're dirty. There's no blessing on that. Unless you're eating, a meal, right? As we said, right? You're not starting the meal yet, so it's too early for that. Right? So the custom is, right, like this, the Rama, what he says here, that the head of the household does not pour his own cup, right? So somebody else should do it for him. So he says somebody else should do it for him, right? And by the way, now the custom is, right, that somebody else does for everybody, like that, whatever. So this way, why is that? Because it demonstrates emancipation, right? And you've been freed, and emancipated, and you become a free people, right? And the prominence, right? Whatever you want to call it, right? All these kinds of things. So this is the reason why we do it like that. So that somebody should do it. The Rama says, right, for the head of the household, he shouldn't have to do it himself. But if he's by himself, then he's got no choice, obviously, right? We're talking about that there's other people there. So otherwise, right, there's no choice. What can you do, right? You do the best we can. We do the best we can. Okay, very good. So we'll stop here, Bezrat Hashem. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. And Bezrat Hashem, Chazak Baruch, Laila Tov. We got one more night, right, tomorrow, and then we're going into the Shabbat.
Kavod Harav, thank you so much.
God bless.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All the best.